Hey all, and welcome back to Fuzzy Dutchy Gaming and a new video looking over the newest balance manifesto. I don't normally do these sort of videos, but for something like Archnemesis, it's a massive, massive deal and is a lot of people's breaking point when it comes to the game. So I thought we'd go through the manifesto. It's fairly vague, but it gives a really good explanation of kind of what they're doing with the Archnemesis mods. I've only really had a quick, brief look through it, so I'm going to go through it in detail and go through kind of what my thoughts are with the changes. So they firstly just mentioned the issues that players had. So first one, keyword mod names were not really descriptive of what they did. That's a massive issue I have. And even for someone who plays the game a lot, still don't know what half of them do. Second, again, sort of ties in with the first. The mods often had multiple effects bundled, which made them harder to understand. Again, very, very true. Third one, due to how many effects are included in a single mod, it made too many encounters too complex. It wasn't the fact it made them complex, it was the fact it made them stupidly difficult. So if you got mixtures of combinations, especially in things like essence monsters or legion or Einar harvest, that sort of thing, it just made things way more difficult and unpredictable. And then the last one is the way the rewards were set up meant that players felt like they couldn't just kill a monster. If they wanted big loot explosions, they had to find characters to come in and kill the enemy for them. What they've said their new system is, which sound very much like Nemesis, is mods just do one thing. The mods also say what they do rather than have a thematic name that you've got to learn and remember. They've said encounters are going to be simplified on average while retaining interest in fights. I don't like the way they use the word interesting. It's not really very interesting. It's just, difficult, which if it's just on the odd occasion is absolutely fine. And then players no longer required to do annoying actions to maximize rewards. On to looking at the things individually. So like they've said, mods do one thing. So the example they've given is magma barrier. That did loads of things and was definitely one of the most annoying Archnemesis mods, because it would put a magma barrier around itself, which means you couldn't really get near it. It then shoot volatiles out, did fizzes fire, took reduced fire damage, just did loads of things in one. And the basics saying magma barrier, the mod is now just the magma barrier, and that is one modifier. Then there may be a volatile modifier, but that will be a separate modifier. So it means you're not going to get, apart from very rare occasions where you get all these things stack up together. And even if you do, you're going to know what they mean because all of the words are going to be there on the name of the monster. So this follows on to the next bit, which is mods do kind of say what they do rather than have a name that you've got to learn. An example here is Incendiary, which basically did loads of different fire things. Now they're all split into separate things. So if that's a monster that will ignite, that's called Ignite. If it's resistant to fire resistance, it's called Fire Resistant. So there's lots and lots of, it looks like there's going to be more mods. They're diluted down, and they still might stack up to their old combination, but it would be very, very rare that that happens. And then Deadeye is an example they've given, which to me is one of the worst mods as an attack build. It now splits everything up. So it applies a random mark, or it's extra crits, or it's extra accurate, but they're separate, unrelated mods to each other. So the good thing about it is you could get stuff that actually doesn't do that much harm to specific builds. So you could get one that says takes less fire damage, takes less cold damage, but you're a lightning build, so you've got a double Archnemesis modifier that doesn't affect your build at all. Same thing could be said of Deadeye if you're not a crit build and you get the monster receives less damage from crits, then doesn't matter to you because you don't do any crit. You may be a build that avoids all damage or extra damage from critical strikes. So enemies doing more damage with crits does nothing because you just take no extra damage. So it's RNG again, but I think you've got more chance of being able to handle the modifiers with a good mix of builds, which to me is really important. Like build diversity is the best thing in the game for me, and Archnemesis really did kill it. And I think these changes bring it back round a little bit. So they've also mentioned that the encounters are simplified. So what they've said is a lot of the mods that were more complicated, like volatiles or ground effects on death, have been diluted by the presence of simpler mods, which is true. They're going to turn up less often and in combinations that might be more manageable. They mentioned lastly that players no longer need to do annoying actions to maximize rewards. And that is true. You don't know now when you're going to get that loot goblin, but they do still exist by the sounds of these texts. They still exist. You just don't know where they are because it's this part here that's the most important. So in the new system, we've added a significant pool of new rewards to the rares, which is cool. We don't know what they are yet, but it'd be really interesting to find out. We've also said the reward on the monster is hidden, so you don't know what reward it is. The more important thing is they've said it's not associated with a specific mod. So the rewards are not tied to modifiers anymore. So it's not like after a week, you'll know that extra crit, the reward that sits with it is currency, or the reward that sits with it is duplicating divination cards. No one knows because according to this, they're going to be totally separate from the monster mods. And I think this change is really, really good. It encourages you to kill all monsters, even if they're a bit tough. You're not going to just automatically skip a monster because you know it's just going to drop a load of flasks that you don't need. I do like that. The only issue really I have is I don't think on average Archnemesis was rewarding enough to make it worthwhile killing. But now the monsters are a bit easier. Maybe it balances that out a bit. But I would still like to see the rewards spread out a bit more, which they might do, so that you get a bit more consistent loot from the monsters instead of, unless you got a loot goblin, you're getting nothing more than an alchemy orb at best. So they basically said Archnemesis was brought about because the old system was out of date. And it was. The Nemesis system, as it was called, was a lot of the mods didn't do anything really. Some of them were very annoying and did a lot of damage. But overall, with power creep, they ended up not really doing anything. And you could ignore the mods in 99.9% of the cases. So Archnemesis was brought out to be an updated version, give a bit more challenge, and be a bit more transparent. But they just bought too many mods out, too many strange names, and too many Archnemesis mods had multiple effects. In fact, they all did. And it just confuses everyone. I've played the game now for, I think it's 2 leagues that Archnemesis has been in. I still don't know what half the mods do other than, you know, if you get something like Executioner, your health drains, but I have no idea why I had to counter it because I've never looked into it. I know that anything with a fire related name will do something to do with fire, but I don't know if it's extra damage, less damage taken, more chance to ignite. I have no idea because the mods are named really, really badly. So there's 2 things that scream out to me that this will affect, and we'll have to wait to see if they bring out a Q&A. But Headhunter and Inspired Learning look like they're getting a massive nerf from this change in systems. Reason being is that before, when they first brought out Archnemesis, Headhunter got buffed up to 1 minute because they realized that the Archnemesis mods had nowhere near the power of Nemesis modifiers and you couldn't stack them. So they increased it to 1 minute. That made Headhunter feel really, really good. However, now they've basically split 1 buff into 4. Inspired Learning sounds like it could be in big, big trouble as a chase item. Because if you're just going to get stuff like has fire resistance, has chance to ignite, has chance to chill, takes less ignite damage, stuff like that, all these mods that you might get on an Inspired Learning are not going to help you clear a map quicker, and they're not really going to boost the power of your character. Same with Headhunter. Let's say the number of mods on Archnemesis stays the same, so you're generally running into 2 or 3 mod monsters. What they are now is less than 1 mod. So if you have 1 Archnemesis mod, you might get 4 different types of buffs from that mod. Now you're basically getting 3/4 of that mod, but for 2 to 3 number of buffs. So I'd be interested to see whether there's any changes afoot, whether they're going to add the Atlas node back in where you can add modifiers to rare monsters. Are they going to change it so that Headhunter lasts even longer? Can you stack the buffs now because you can't stack the old ones? There's lots of things I think need looking at and addressing because as I see it at the moment with the changes to the mod system, Inspired Learning is looking like a pretty bad jewel in my opinion. Headhunter will still be good, but I do think it looks like the power's been massively nerfed if there aren't any further changes to sort of supplement the watering down of the pool that they're doing on the modifiers. So what I thought we'd do is just go through some examples of current Archnemesis to go through why it was so build breaking and so frustrating to run into certain mods. So let's take the Bone Shatter build that I'm playing in Delve. It's a physical build and it's an attack build. It relies on stun to do more damage and to get buffs. So the first one here, Steel Infused, is a very big problem for that build. They take 30% reduced physical damage. The Bone Shatter build only does fizz damage. And they've got a 250% increased stun threshold, which means you're not going to be stunning rare enemies on like a budget setup. They also do more damage to you, but that doesn't really matter. I'm more looking at the tankiness of how a monster could be. And this is a very, very common mod. And another very common mod, which it rolls with, is Sentinel. 50% chance to block attack damage. They only take 20% of damage from blocked hits. So essentially, they're blocking every 2 hits that you do. And when they do block, they're only taking 20% of the damage. That combined with Sentinel basically makes the monster 2 to 3 times as tanky as it would normally be. Now, if you come into a 2-mod enemy, going by their manifesto, these are all different mods. So it might be, if you run into what was previously Steel Infuse and Sentinel, you might get 50% chance to block spell damage, which doesn't matter for my build, and monster does 40% increased physical damage, which I've got a metric ton of mitigation against physical damage. So what in 3.19 would just be a pain. Wasn't necessarily dangerous on a build that's tanky, but was just annoying because it takes so long to kill these monsters. Whereas now, with a mixed combination, I basically don't have to worry about the mods. You are still going to get times where not very nice mods roll with not very nice mods. That's fine. I don't think anyone has an issue with that. And there has to be some level of risk to this sort of system. But you can equally run into things that don't do really anything to you whatsoever. So let's take, again, I've got a physical build. Let's say I run into Flameweaver. There are stuff on here that shut down fire builds pretty badly. If I'm running a Fizz build, there are still mods that are going to affect me. So this, for example, inflicts fire exposure on hit, means I take more damage from fire damage. And this monster does 50% Fizz as extra fire, 25% converted to fire, 50% increased fire damage. So this is huge. So this is a lot of extra fire damage on me. But if I run into this mod in the new system and it just plucks one mod out of the air, it could be this. 50% fire resistance. I don't do any fire damage on a Fizz build. Doesn't affect me whatsoever. It might roll with a Stormweaver that's got plus 50 to lightning resistance. Again, doesn't do anything. So there's going to be combinations that are difficult, but there's going to be combinations that might be rewarding that are literally just as easy as a white or standard pre-Archnemesis magic monster. That's kind of all I wanted to go through, is just my thoughts on the Archnemesis Manifesto. I honestly didn't think they would backtrack this much. I think it's 100% the right decision. I'm really happy that they did it. And I'm now looking forward to seeing what the rest of the manifestos are going to bring. Just to try and get some excitement back to the League launch, because we're now, realistically, they haven't brought a date out yet, probably about 3 and a bit weeks away from League start. And honestly, I've never been less interested or less excited about a new League. Normally by this point, I'm itching to get my League starters like in progress in terms of planning them. Obviously, manifesto and patch notes aside, I'm already trying new things out. I'm not at the moment because nothing is really grabbing me with excitement. So I'm hoping that the manifestos that come out kind of get people's interest back to Path of Exile. And then when they bring their launch out, like a week before the League start, and they bring all their teasers out and they bring out their big live stream, hopefully it's a banger and it makes us all want to play that League and get stuck in. But that's it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. Take care and see you in the next one.